In the South China Sea, a dangerous drama is unfolding. A David versus Goliath struggle between the Philippines and China. This vast expanse of water, rich in resources and vital shipping lanes, has become the stage for one of the world's most volatile territorial disputes. Every day, Filipino fishermen and sailors find themselves navigating not just the waves, but the ever-present threat of confrontation with Chinese vessels. Tensions have reached a boiling point as China asserts sweeping claims over nearly the entire sea, overlapping the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. These claims, marked by the so-called Nine-Dash Line, cut deep into waters long relied upon by Filipinos for their livelihoods and are fiercely contested by neighboring countries. An international tribunal rejected China's claims in 2016, siding with the Philippines and upholding international law. Yet Beijing dismissed the ruling outright, continuing to enforce its will with a powerful navy and coast guard, building artificial islands and military outposts to cement its presence. Filipino resupply missions to the BRP Sierra Madre, a remote outpost marooned on a contested reef, now face aggressive blockades and even violence from Chinese forces. These tense encounters have become routine, with water cannons, ramming, and dangerous maneuvers putting lives at risk. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has taken a firm stance, refusing to yield territory and strengthening alliances with the United States, Japan, and other partners to counter Beijing's ambitions. His administration has called for international support, insisting that the Philippines will not be bullied into submission. China's response has been even more aggressive, with increased patrols, new military installations, and a willingness to escalate at sea. The risk of miscalculation grows with every close encounter, creating a dangerous cycle of provocation and retaliation. The world watches anxiously as diplomats scramble for solutions and newsrooms track every incident, knowing that one wrong move could ignite a much larger conflict, one that could draw in global powers and destabilize the region. The South China Sea is no longer just a fishing ground, it's a front line in a global power struggle, where the fate of nations and the balance of power in Asia may be decided. Tensions in the South China Sea have erupted into violent confrontations, transforming the region into one of the world's most dangerous maritime flashpoints. What was once a simmering dispute over territory and resources has now become a series of high-stakes encounters, with both sides unwilling to back down. Each new incident pushes the region closer to the brink of open conflict, as military officials on both sides monitor the situation with growing anxiety and urgency. In June 2024, the world watched as Chinese vessels aggressively swarmed Filipino boats during a routine resupply mission. The confrontation quickly escalated into a brutal melee. Chinese forces, some armed with bladed weapons, punctured the rubber boats and seized vital equipment, leaving the Filipino crew vulnerable and outnumbered. The violence left a Filipino Navy SEAL gravely injured, losing his thumb in the chaos, a stark reminder of how quickly these standoffs can turn deadly, and how real the human cost has become. In response, General Romeo Bronner declared that his troops have the right to defend themselves, signaling a new, more assertive stance from the Philippine military. This declaration has raised fears that future encounters could spiral even further out of control. Just 2 months later in August, a Chinese Coast Guard ship rammed the Philippine Coast Guard's Cape Engano, tearing a gaping hole in its hull and forcing the vessel to retreat. The deliberate collision underscored the growing willingness to use force at sea. These incidents are not isolated, they're part of a calculated pattern. China appears to be testing the limits, probing how far it can push before the Philippines, or the international community, is forced to respond. On the front lines, Captain Daniel Labay and his crew face overwhelming force with remarkable courage, but their options are dwindling as each encounter grows more dangerous and unpredictable. Every clash raises the stakes, making the risk of fatalities, and the possibility of a much wider crisis, more likely with each passing day. The South China Sea is now a volatile flashpoint, where every encounter between ships could ignite a conflict with global consequences, drawing in regional powers and threatening the fragile peace of the Indo-Pacific. China's approach is classic gray zone warfare, coercive actions just below open war, designed to avoid direct military response. Its massive Coast Guard and maritime militia harass and block Philippine ships, all under the guise of law enforcement. Artificial islands like Mischief Reef have become military bases, projecting Chinese power deep into the region. Chinese vessels use water cannons, dangerous maneuvers, and constant shadowing to intimidate and wear down the Philippines. The psychological toll is immense, keeping the region in a state of perpetual tension. By avoiding outright war, China makes decisive international response difficult. It's a slow campaign to establish control, one reef, one encounter at a time. The Philippines faces a relentless, grinding pressure that tests its resolve daily. The United States has reaffirmed its commitment to the Philippines under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, a pact that has shaped the security landscape of Southeast Asia for over 70 years. This treaty not only binds the two nations in mutual defense, but also serves as a cornerstone of America's strategic presence in the region. Recent U.S. administrations have made it abundantly clear that any armed attack on Philippine forces, aircraft, or vessels in the South China Sea will trigger treaty obligations. This explicit assurance is meant to deter aggression and reassure the Philippines of unwavering American support. The U.S. has backed these words with action, providing military aid, upgrading Philippine bases, and deploying advanced missile systems to enhance deterrence. Joint exercises and training missions have also increased, strengthening interoperability between the two militaries. High-level meetings and public condemnations of China's actions send a strong deterrent message to Beijing. These diplomatic efforts are reinforced by visible demonstrations of military cooperation and unity. The BRP Sierra Madre at Second Thomas Shoal remains a potential flashpoint. Any Chinese attempt to seize or blockade the outpost could invoke the treaty and draw in U.S. forces, escalating tensions dramatically. The U.S. presence is designed to deter China from taking aggressive actions, but it also increases the risk of direct confrontation between two nuclear-armed superpowers. Even a minor miscalculation could have far-reaching consequences. For the Philippines, this alliance is a vital security guarantee, yet the stakes have never been higher, as the country finds itself on the front lines of a great power rivalry that could shape the future of the entire region. The world's attention is now fixed on these contested waters, where a single incident or misstep could trigger a global crisis. The South China Sea has become a focal point for international diplomacy and military strategy. The U.S.-Philippines alliance stands as a central pillar in the region's fragile balance, shaping the calculations of all players involved and serving as a bulwark against instability. Ultimately, the South China Sea has become a test of American resolve and credibility in Asia, a proving ground where the future of regional order and perhaps global peace may be decided. Realizing it can't stand alone, the Philippines is forging new partnerships, most notably with India. India, with its own disputes with China, shares Manila's interest in a rules-based order and freedom of navigation. In August 2025, President Marcos Jr. visited India, signing agreements to deepen military cooperation. Indian warships now conduct joint patrols with the Philippine Navy, sending a clear message to Beijing. This partnership diversifies the Philippines' security options and internationalizes the dispute. For India, it's a chance to expand influence and counter China's assertiveness. The alliance reinforces the principle that maritime disputes should be settled by law, not force. The geopolitical map of Asia is shifting, as nations band together to balance China's power. Key leaders are shaping the conflict's course. President Marcos Jr. has taken a bold, defiant stance, rallying international support and refusing to back down. Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro and General Romeo Brawner embody Manila's new confidence, warning China that Filipino forces will defend themselves. On the Chinese side, President Xi Jinping's vision drives a unified, uncompromising approach, with Beijing spokespeople framing their actions as lawful and warning Manila against provocation. The U.S., with figures like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, stands firmly behind the Philippines. On the front lines, individuals like Captain Daniel Labay put a human face on the conflict, risking everything to defend their nation's sovereignty. The decisions of these leaders and frontline personnel will determine the region's fate. The South China Sea is a global crossroads. 1/3 of world shipping passes through, making its stability vital to the global economy. Disruption here would trigger supply chain chaos and economic shockwaves worldwide. The region is also rich in oil, gas, and fisheries, crucial for millions' livelihoods and food security. At stake is not just territory but the principle of resolving disputes by law, not force. China's rejection of the 2016 tribunal ruling threatens the rules-based order that underpins global stability. The world's major powers are invested because the outcome will set a precedent for international law and freedom of navigation. the South China Sea is a litmus test for the future of global order. The South China Sea is a tinderbox. One fatal miscalculation could trigger a regional or even global conflict. The Philippines, under Marcos Jr., is building alliances to deter China, but this also raises the stakes, risking a wider showdown. China remains determined, using coercion and militarization to make its control a reality. Unless the international community unites to impose real costs, Beijing is unlikely to change course. Diplomacy and respect for international law are the only sustainable paths to peace. ASEAN and global powers must demand adherence to the 2016 ruling and push for a binding code of conduct. Without de-escalation, the region will drift toward a conflict no one can afford. The world's future may hinge on what happens next in these contested waters.